Hey everyone, welcome to the Front Row Back Row podcast. Brian and I have each grown physical therapy businesses to 2 million plus in annual revenue. We are looking to get good advice to PTs trying to grow their practices. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to the Front Row Back Row podcast. My name is Dr. Owen Campbell, and with me, as always, is Dr. Brian Wolf. And today we are going to be talking. Brian has built his 5-clinic $2 million practice, not specifically on meta ads, but he runs them for not just his practices, but his partner's practices and even his wife's practice, right? And he is going to tell us why it's so dang hard for physical therapists to get a great return on meta ads. So some businesses, his fitness side of his business, because half of his business is fitness, one of the rare PTs doing that, he is going to walk us through why it's easier to get leads from meta ads for fitness than it is for physical therapy, some of the stuff that he's been trying, right? And with the creative and with the different ad targeting. And then hopefully we're going to be able to find some way that you can take this and make your meta ads just a little bit more precise, maybe a little bit better cost per lead, and we'll talk through that. So if you want to learn more about this, visit our website, www.physio-growth.com. It is where we have our mastermind group once a week. We meet and we do a Q&A with Brian and myself. I do bring something to the table. I've done 14 years of corporate PT where I've taken practices kind of like Brian's and scaled them up. So we can answer everything from starting the back of a car all the way up to trying to sell your practice. So Brian, with that, why is meta ads so damn hard for PTs?
I think I think what's interesting is I love the way that Owen hooked you all in there, but I don't think they're so dang hard. I think what's happened is there's a different customer in the sense of physical therapy versus like fitness, right? And the way that I've described it in general for most people is that if I am I'll take you way back to when I was a new grad physical therapist, and I remember, talking about advertising within our clinic, and we actually created a TV commercial, right? We did a TV commercial. And so the aspect of that was we got 0 patients that we know of from that commercial. Why? 6 months running commercial, very expensive form, right? 10 grand. Didn't really do anything. What about that didn't really work, right? And some people are like, well, it's the times they're running, or this or that, blah, blah. Look, at the end of the day, when it comes to that message, that's a branding message. So when you see something from an aspect of like branding and what you're building from like a commercial or like a some sort of advertisement that way, branding and traffic ads are going to work, just they're going to take a lot longer to work, and you're going to have a lot harder time measuring the ROI for how many dollars you spent on that ad to how much actually translated to actual patients coming through the door. Right. We've talked about this between paid advertising, referral relationships, right? Cold traffic and cold calling to, all these different types of advertising aspects. When it comes to paid advertising in general, the thing about fitness is, if you think of 100 people in a room, right? How many of those 100 people are working on, have some issue that can be fixed by physical therapy, right? Actively. And let's take something like more specific, like let's do like back pain, low back pain, right? And everybody listening to this podcast who is a physical therapist might say, I can help everybody in that room, 100 people in the room. And I get what you're coming from. I'm not trying to start an argument on that. More so what I'm thinking is how many people out of that 100 easily identify that they have an issue that can be fixed by a physical therapist, right? And so the reality of it is, on the flip side, what's easier about fitness is how many of those people, 100% of those, 100 of those people in that room would love to have a 6-pack. Very big shift in the aspect of what people want, right? Because that's the value that you're saying. So when it comes to fitness, it's just an easier way to work on it from a meta perspective. When it comes to physical therapy, I think what we're tinkering with is finding the right offer. And that's what goes back to the PT being like, well, I can help 100 of those people in that room. Yes. But what's the offer that you can provide on an advertisement quickly that will create the widest breadth of how I can help those 100 people, right?
And that's the thing.
Yeah,
I think of your 100-person example, and I'm
yeah,
like, yeah, if there were 100 true believers in wellness and moving correctly and
yeah,
long-term degradation to their joints and all that stuff, then I could sell 100 of them on like my performance side, right, or
yes,
my wellness side. But the reality is, most people are like, I don't want to have to pay for something unless it's really a big problem in my life. So unless they're in
bingo,
active pain, like that's hard, right?
bingo. Yeah, and that's exactly why meta ads are just a little more difficult, right? Meta ads are a little bit bigger of a challenge from a perspective of like, you know, who you're speaking to and the depth of who you're speaking to. So I just feel way more confident about our message around fitness because the reality of fitness is people exercise for one of literally three reasons, right? I mean, and again, for those of you listening, people exercise for one of three reasons. And if you're like, there's other reasons, I'm going to break it down for three. One, I want to lose a buttload of weight. Like I'm heavy and I got to get my shit together. Two, I want to gain muscle and lose fat, right? I want to build that type of like piece of my body together. And the third is I want to live longer, longevity. I want to just like do it for my health. And the reality is like outside of those three, there's not many. Yeah, some people might say stress and anxiety, but I would point more towards a longevity goal, right? Like health. So when you think about those three things, it makes it very easy to advertise those three things. On the flip side, right, I think that when it comes to, physical therapy, there's just a lot more vagueness around
Mhm.
what we sell and so forth. So I think that's the problem. But here's the good news. I think for every one of those like paid advertising, like I think that's why Google ads are really strong for physical therapy because I think that what Google ads do and websites and SEO, what they do is those are people actively trying to find a solution to a problem like back pain or neck pain or whatever. And so if you can crush it on Google, that's the way that I would spend more time on paid advertising for any physical therapist. I would spend a lot more time on that. I always notice that when we work with physical therapy companies, Google's one of the better places to start for any of that physical therapy needs.
Yeah, and I will say I'm in this so I've been trying to figure out meta ads, and I'm one of these guys where I'd rather understand something to like a sophomore level, right? Not just freshman level where it's like, okay, I kind of know what it is, but like, I know a little bit about the metrics for two reasons. A, I'm cheap. I want to see if I can do it myself, right? Um, but the other thing is, I know eventually I'm going to have to trade time for money, right? And
Yeah,
I'm going to have to hire somebody to run my ads, right? I'm going to have to do all these things that, unless I have a real passion for it, right? I'm going to have to do it, right? So I want to know, is this vendor that I'm hiring blowing smoke up my ass, right?
yeah,
So I love learning about this stuff. And one of the things now I'm really starting to take a deep dive into Google ads, right? And I
yeah,
will say, I started Google ads a year ago when I first started, right? And it was very kind of clunky, right? You had your negative words, right? That you would
yeah,
say, okay, I don't want somebody to search for do it yourself, right? Because I don't want to show up and people trying to fix their own shoulder. I want to show up for people who want their shoulder fixed, right?
yeah,
Um, so I got that part, but like the actual analytics of Google ads have gotten so much better because I
yeah,
just started a new campaign and I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. I'll just go with my old profile and all that. And I saw my old metrics and all that. And then I saw the new ones and I was like, oh my God, like they can track it. And if you have Google Analytics, which I do through my website builder, right? Because I want to see where I'm at in the search engine and all that. You can actually track it a lot better than you could even 6 months ago.
yeah,
6 months to a year ago. I don't know. I wasn't around. I wasn't doing it 6 months ago. But so this is the crazy thing about ads is that they change, right?
for sure.
YouTube fed me a video of like this huge like Meta ads creator who basically said like Meta just completely changed their algorithm like in the
Yeah,
last like 2 months or 2 weeks, right? Um, and it's going to completely affect and maybe he's doing it for clicks, but the guy's got a good following. I'm assuming he knows what he's talking about, right? So
yeah,
it's
Meta's
very interesting to see how it
always
changes.
yeah, and Meta's always looking to switch stuff up, right? They're always
Yeah.
looking for that. So one of the things that happens with Meta that I think is a bit of a challenge is the fact that when you look at what you're trying to fix, right? And like I've heard this story several times actually with some different people. So like what's cool about learning advertising that Owen's trying to do now is obviously learn so that you can learn to track other people and how it's working and how it's fixing things. By working with certain advertising agencies, I also think it's really good to utilize those agencies and trying to learn what they're doing and learn those skills to help you. Really beneficial skill to have in general for anything in life, by the way. You can go outside of physical therapy and utilize that skill set.
Yeah.
Ultimately, what I think is interesting is that Meta's always changing stuff. So you just have to constantly be paying attention and thinking about what's causing the change. What are you seeing in the numbers and the metrics and what's causing that? Like, how are the frequency of your ads being delivered? What's the cost per lead? What's am I doing traffic stuff? What's the goal of what we're trying to do? Like, you know, we found there's different ways to market different things. Like, am I trying to get different visits? Am I trying to get this? And as long as you understand what the goal is and what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it, as long as you're starting to accomplish that goal, you'll see huge benefits. So I think the good news about advertising is it's always just going to draw more eyeballs to your business. And therefore, if that's how that works, it should accelerate word of mouth at a minimum. So the reality is like no dollar spent for advertising should be a bad dollar, because in theory, there's just better leverage dollars, if that makes sense. So like whether someone's creating content, you're paying for advertising, all that stuff. Like I just think it's an easy thing to, start strategically of where you can leverage your dollars the best.
Okay, so for someone listening now and they're saying, "All right, guys, but my Meta ads,
Yep.
they're, am I behind? Am I ahead? Am I whatever?" Right? I think that it's important for those listeners to know, like, a lot is in the offer, right? So knowing, what you represent, what you do, what you're going for, right? So like you said, Google ads are for
Yep.
people who are already like, I need physical therapy. They're what are they, solution aware, I think is the term, where they know they need PT. They just want to pick which one,
Yeah.
right? And then Meta ads are more for people that are problem aware, right? Like they have a sore shoulder and maybe I do PT, maybe I do chiropractic, maybe I have mobile,
Yep.
maybe I have, that type of thing. So when you're thinking about what you're trying to sell, you got to think, who are you selling to? And then I think you have to also keep that in mind from your results part, right? So if you're running a leads campaign, right?
Yep.
In fitness, where Brian says, man, you have a room full of 100 people who all want a six pack, right? You'd probably be pretty happy with maybe $20 a lead, right? $30 a lead. That would be really good.
Yeah.
Whereas you may want to change your expectations, right? If you're running that same type of thing for a much smaller pool of people who have shoulder pain that's bothering them, right?
Yes.
And you might want to say, okay, I have a successful campaign at maybe $50 a lead, right? Where it's like, okay, now the nice part about that is typically you're getting more money in a shorter amount of time from a physical therapy plan of care than you are from a fitness membership, right? Or a fitness challenge, right?
Maybe.
Unless you're Brian and you charge crazy Connecticut rates.
It's not even crazy Connecticut rates. It's just the way your business is set up. You just have to be like all businesses in physical therapy, fitness, name the thing. It's just figuring out what offers really work and how you can back end pricing and different things to make it worth it. Some things are better than others, right?
Yeah.
And so when you can really optimize that, you can hit it out of the park. However, there's pros and cons to all this stuff, right? Like it's just a matter of like, that's why I say like maybe like we have that's why 6-week challenges become so popular for fitness, is because you can charge if you're getting leads at, here's how the math works. This simple. If I can it's a model where basically if I can get $200 leads, right? Where to get to or the cost of acquiring customers $200, and my leads are like $14 leads, right?
Yeah.
And I get 10 people, so that's 140. So for 10 people, that's 140. Let's call it $150 to get those 10 leads. If I sell one of those people at $599 for a 6-week challenge, I just made that money. And that's not considering all the exactly. That's not considering all that. So again, when you say about fitness, like the thing about physical therapy is I think some of these leads are higher, but that's how the math all works. It's like what you're looking to do is just continually covering your advertising costs in that moment early. And if you can do that effectively, then what happens is you can keep pushing your marketing budget up. And that's how you can keep building the business bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's the idea.
And that's what I look at. So from the cash PT side, where I'm at 175 a visit, I'm pretty comfortable if I can get something that's around $50 a lead, right? And say I get 10 leads and I close one, which would be a pretty low close rate, but like, let's just say, worst case scenario.
It's a typical one. That's a typical realistic close rate.
Exactly, right. I would need to be a much better salesperson to even get it to like 15 or 20, right?
Yeah.
So, but if you're just doing this yourself as a guy who's a specialist in PT, not in sales, 1 out of 10 happy, right? So I spend $500, but my average lifetime value of a customer is 1,500, right?
Yeah.
So to me, that's still 3 to 1, right?
Exactly.
Whereas Brian might have that challenge. He's getting 4 to 1, right? So it's a better return, but it's a lower ticket. It's 600 versus 1,500 over 6 weeks, right?
Yeah.
But because it was cheaper for him to do leads, it's a little bit better. But still, 3 to 1, you're doing real freaking well as a physical therapist if you can get 3 times return on investment, right?
For sure.
I think these are things that if I'm looking at influencers who are all about ads and things like that, you got to know what business they're talking about, because it does change the math.
Well, and what Owen just talked about and what I just talked about are a little different, right? So if he's looking at the lifetime value of the customer as he's going towards that, so it allows him to be a little more patient with the advertising. I'm talking about upfront cost, like upfront what I'm getting upfront. So I'm getting $5.99, so I can put that money right back into advertising off the bat. I didn't talk about lifetime value at all.
Yeah.
So the reality is where Owen is Owen's kind of going in the hole initially for the advertising, but he's coming out of it in the positive as long as he completes those plan of cares.
Yep.
This is why physical therapy packages are so good, because in theory, say it's like, hey, it's $1,500 as lifetime value of the person. Well, what Owen knows is, hey, at $175, one of the things he can do is he can say, hey, for a 10-pack of visits, I make it $1,500. So you basically save $250, and Owen knows up front, I got all that money for $1,500. Well, what can Owen do with that money? Guess what? He's covered his average. Exactly.
Yep.
That's how you can scale a business. So see how we just created a different model just based off of understanding those numbers, So I think that's the bigger piece that's important when it comes to that's a cash-based thing. When it comes to the insurance-based thing, you can't necessarily do that, but that's okay. Like, we still just have to parse out the time. So we understand that our lifetime value for most patients is about $1,000, and that's not including into the people who do our fitness programs or any of the other stuff. So, one of the other things that I would say of why running physical therapy ads for PT in the insurance world is tough is because you kind of got to come out of pocket for it, and it is what it is. But it's one of those things where from a cash-based perspective, you can do what I just talked about, which is get that money in there and initially get money back. So typically that works really nicely. So it's a matter of understanding, again, the process of I have my offers, I'm creating more. How many leads am I getting? How am I doing it, converting them for sales? And like, what's my lifetime value? What's the cost of acquiring customers? Like that kind of thing. Just understanding the business model. So that's really the big difference.
And if all of this sounds foreign to you, you need to join our mentorship group.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Because this is basic stuff. If you're like a great example of something that I'm working on with one of my physical therapists is like a golf program that we've got to talk about with Owen. And like, I'm tracking that money. And the reality is like, this is how I'm tracking if I'm going to pay him more money while we do the program. Right.
Yep.
If I can track all that stuff and see what he's bringing in, it creates so much more value. So you can be a physical therapist that doesn't even want to have anything to do with opening their own business, but just wants to make a better salary. Join our group and we'll help you make more money. That's a big piece for it. So this is what we do. Physio-growth.com. We help physical therapists level up in their career in the physical therapy world, right? Whether it's owning their own practice, whether it's becoming a more valuable employee, whether it's, seeing the angles on how to grow within organizations or scale it to a multi, 7-figure exit like what Owen was doing. Like, that's what we help people do.
8.
8 figures. Nice. Do a nice one. Nice.
All right. So with that, man, we are out. Have a good one.
Thanks. See you, man.